perspective worksheets. All right, worksheet 1 is talking about how we create the openings. Again, 2-point perspective rules. All diagonal lines go back to point A or point B. In this case, we're making all of the openings go back to point A. So from our initial vertical line, I'm drawing lines back to point A. We then cut them off with a vertical line to create the opening, or the opening of the window. You can make these as long or as short as you want to. The length of the diagonals back to A determines the length of the opening. Now notice this one, I'm lining it up with A, but I'm drawing it the other direction. Sort of making kind of a stair-step opening here. Get one more, maybe a stair-step the opposite way. All vertical lines are parallel. From the top there, we can go back to A. So there we go, we've got 4 openings. Worksheet number 2, we're going to make these openings look like they're indented, like there's holes going through the paper. So when we make the indent lines, the inside lines, they're going back to point B. So now I've got a ceiling and I've got a side wall inside that hole there, inside the opening. There's a ceiling, there's a side wall, there's the top of the ledge, the side of the ledge, and the bottom. Again, from the corner back to point B. And there we go, now we have holes. Alright, indents shallow. So this is the same as creating the holes, except we want to make these indents look like they're shallower, like they actually have a back to them. So again, I'm going from the corner back to B, but I'm not going quite as far. Vertical line for the side wall, and then from the corner there, where the line back to B and the vertical line meet, we go back to A. So now we have a back wall within our opening. Line back to B, vertical line, side wall, back to A for the bottom, and then we have our back wall. So this is a shallow indent. Only 3 kinds of lines: vertical lines, lines to A, and lines to B. 2-point perspective. Ledge and back wall. Alright, windows and doors. How can we create windows and doors inside of a indent or an opening? Real simple. We start with an initial vertical line, and I'm going to take and line my ruler up back to point A, and I'm just kind of trying to draw the span of the windows. So this is like a large rectangle here, and then I'm going to divide this section up into my windows. So I've got a line and then a space, a line, and then another space here. I'm going to erase the lines in between. So now we have 3 windows. We want to make them look like they are indented. They have ledges in them, so it's the same process as sheet number 3. Connecting this back to A so we can see the underside top, and back to B so we can see the sides here, inside left side of the window. And we're going to go back to A so that we can make the bottom ledge of the window. Windows, door, same thing. Start with an initial vertical line, and we're going to go from the top of that line back to point A and making our opening. Now we've got to make our inside portion of the door. So we can see the side and upper inside. Nice. Alright, steps and protrusions. You're going to notice here that we've got things that look like they're protruding out. We've got a staircase. I've intentionally left the top and bottom of the opening open so that way we can draw the protrusions. So to start with the steps, we're going back to A, and you're going to notice a pattern here. So it's back to A, a vertical line, back to A, vertical line. From the corners, we're going to go back to point B. go from the inside corners as well as the outside corners back to B, so we can make the sort of vertical and horizontal parts of the steps. And the next step is to cut these off. We want to decide how the length of the steps, and you simply start with a vertical line, and from that vertical line you go back to A, and then up and over, and back to A, and up. Steps. Alright, for the protrusions, you're going to notice that these go back to A and B, but for the length of it, we're going back to B. So I'm just establishing how far this is coming out. I'm going to go ahead and draw a vertical line for the front edge. And from the top of that vertical line, I'm going back to B and also back to A. Remember, there's only three kinds of lines. Lines to A, lines to B, and vertical lines. So that looks like a little diving board or something, and here we can draw one at the top here. Vertical line. From that vertical line, I'm going back to, that's the bottom in here. From the vertical line back to A. Another vertical. And back to A. And we have protrusions. We can go ahead and finish this off with the inside of the indent. Make it look like there's a ledge there that's on the inside, and a back wall, and a bottom ledge. Line that up with the steps. There you go. Steps and protrusions. Alright, so we're going to do a rough drawing with a rubber band. I have a piece of masonite board, my drawing surface, some tape, and I'm just getting a rubber band. I'm going to cut it. And you notice I've got points A and B down here. I'm going to take a thumbtack. I'm going to tack the rubber band where points A and points B are. This is kind of a pretty cool technique for doing two-point perspective. The band is flexible. You can move it in different directions. I'm going to go ahead and put my list up here of what is required. This is a really quick way to sketch two-point perspective. You can use a paper clip to kind of pull and drag the rubber band where you need it. So we want to make our openings first, just like on the worksheets. I'm starting with a vertical line. I'm going to take my rubber band and I'm going to drag it up to the top. And notice how that rubber band goes back to point A. Ooh, that's pretty nifty, isn't it? Look at that. So I want to make an opening here that's a little bit different. Maybe kind of like a S shape or Z shape, S shape. And again, I'm using vertical lines, lines to A and lines to B. For the openings, all of the lines are going back to A. So notice that I'm still lining it up with A, even though I'm extending it out. And you can make this opening as complex as you want. Again, try to keep all your vertical lines parallel. This is a sketch, so it's not going to be perfect because we're not using a straight edge right now. It's just a really quick way to sort of plan out ideas. So we want 8 indents minimum. All of my indents are verticals and going back to A. Alright, so the next step is just like the worksheets, we're going to add the indent depth. This time we're going to stretch the rubber band so it goes back to point B. Again, I want to do that from all the inside corners. Go ahead and connect those to make the inside depths. Back to B, back to A. You can vary the thickness of the depths. They don't all have to be the same. Make some thin, some really deep. Completely up to you. You must have a minimum of 15 windows and doors. So again, just like on the worksheet, you're placing those wherever you'd like to. I think it makes the drawing more interesting when you have the more windows and doors that you have. They can go actually in the indent or on the sides of the indent. Completely up to you, just following the pattern. Again, 3 kinds of lines. Lines to A, lines to B, and vertical lines. I'm trying to make a complex drawing here. Need a minimum of 2 staircases, so you want to find a place for those. Again, we're just trying to follow the rules. 2-point perspective. And sometimes your rubber band might break, so simply just take it and try to pin it, stretch it out a little bit, try to pin it back onto the board, and you should be good to go. Easier said than done. Since this is a rough drawing, I'm going to go ahead and just use it for my lines back to B and just kind of make my lines up back to A, just try to eyeball those. We are going to clean this up later. So this is again, rough sketch. I want to draw lightly so that we have less erasing, less pencil lines. And lastly, we have to have a minimum of 4 spheres, just circles. Okay, you just want to kind of place those wherever you want. Maybe they're on a ledge, maybe they're inside the indent. Completely up to you. And lastly, we need a minimum of 2 protrusions. Set my rubber band up here. Your protrusions can come out of an indent. They can come out of just sort of the main blank area. It's completely up to you how you want to draw these. Just like on the worksheets, I'm making them protrude. They're going back to B. When they extend out, and then the lines to sort of square them off go back to A. So once we have our rough drawing complete, now we can go back and simply just line everything up with a ruler. So I'm taking a ruler and my number 2 pencil, and I'm making sure that these things are nice and clean now. All my lines are nice and clean and that they line up with the points. Occasionally when you use the rubber band technique, the lines might not always align with the point. This is a good time to fix that. I'm using really firm pressure because I want my lines to really stand out. I want them to be nice and bold. Take your time on this step. This is what's going to make your drawing nice and crisp and nice and clean. You can also use a circle stencil for the spheres. Alright, so we're going to actually shade these with graphite pencil and colored pencil, but before we do that, we need to select a light source. So we need to kind of label our drawing with what the values are going to be inside each indent. There's really not a right or wrong way to do this, you just want to be consistent throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and label mine this way. I'm going to try to continue that all the way throughout the drawing. So I've got light, medium, dark, and then light, medium. That's what LM stands for. We're going to be using a 4H pencil for our really light values. 4H pencil is a really hard lead, and it will give you really light gray values. You want to use that on your light and light medium values. For my light medium value, I'm going to press just a little bit firmer, just so that's a little bit more gray than the light area. I'm going to use a number 2 pencil for my medium values. Again, cross hatching, trying to make this nice and smooth, nice and even. And then for our dark areas, we're using a 6B pencil. This is really soft lead. It's going to give you a darker value. Shading the sphere here, we want to try to make it look rounded. So you're going to have multiple values in there with highlights. Once we have the graphite finished, we are going to tint these with a colored pencil. The key word is tint. I'm going to use really light pressure. I just want to give this the vague illusion that there's color there. I don't want it to be really bright and colorful. I want it to just be soft color. So I'm have real light pressure. Again, going right underneath the top of the graphite with a colored pencil. Same thing here on the sphere. Use some green. You can always go back and add more graphite just to enhance the depth if you need to. We want these to be nice and smooth. And here's a finished version. One of the first versions I did. I don't have the spheres in here, but you can see the nice shading, scumbling technique, cross-hatching technique. This is tinted purple, and another side is tinted a little bit green. And as I show you the rest of this, you can kind of get the idea for the complexity. I think it's kind of a neat illusion, again, based on the artist Matthew Borrett.